I never imagined that growing old would feel this lonely. My name is Robert. I'm 67. And for most of my life, I believed I had built something strong, a family, a legacy, a home. But life has a cruel way of showing you just how fragile all of that really is. I live in Florida now, in a quiet retirement neighborhood, not too far from the ocean. The air smells of salt water and pine trees. Tourists always say it's paradise. But what does paradise mean when the people you love the most make you feel like a stranger? For years, my son Michael was my pride. He was smart, ambitious, the kind of man I thought would carry forward the values I worked so hard to instill. His wife, Emily, came into our lives about 10 years ago. At first, she seemed kind, polite, respectful. She always called me Dad. I thought, finally, Michael found someone who would love him the way he deserved. But slowly, little cracks began to show. Small comments at family dinners, whispers I wasn't supposed to hear, cold looks when Michael wasn't watching. I brushed them off. After all, maybe I was just too sensitive. Widowed, older, trying to hold onto relevance in a family that was moving forward without me. Then last Christmas, everything changed. I had spent weeks preparing for the holiday. I decorated the house, bought gifts with the little pension money I had, and even baked my late wife's favourite pie, the one recipe everyone always begged me to make. I was excited because Michael promised me they'd come. He told me the kids couldn't wait to see Grandpa. But on Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. I still remember every word. Dad, we're not coming. Emily thinks it's better if we just celebrate as a family this year. Please understand. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. As a family, what did that make me? I was his father. I raised him, sacrificed everything so he could have a better life. And now suddenly, I wasn't part of the picture. I tried to call him, but he didn't pick up. Hours passed. I sat there at my dining table, candles burning down, food getting cold. And then I heard it. A whisper that wasn't meant for me. I'd accidentally pocket dialed Michael earlier, and when I played back the voicemail, it left. I heard Emily's voice clear as day. She was saying in the background, she's not family. She gets nothing. At first, I thought I misheard. Who was she talking about? Was it me? Or someone else? But the way she said it, sharp, cold, almost venomous, made my blood run cold. That one whisper cracked everything wide open. Was this why they didn't invite me? Was Emily already trying to push me out, erase me from my own son's life? Maybe even from my grandkids' lives? And what did she mean by gets nothing? Nothing of what? Love? Time? Or something bigger? Inheritance? My home? The only security I had left? That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the words in my head, over and over. She's not family. She gets nothing. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized. This wasn't just a passing comment. This was a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. I didn't know it then, but Emily's whisper would set off a chain of events that would tear open every fragile bond I still had with my son and force me to make choices I never wanted to make. But before I tell you how it all unfolded, I need to take you back. Because to understand the betrayal, you first need to understand the years of love, sacrifice, and trust that made it possible. The next morning, I tried to convince myself that maybe I had misheard. Maybe my daughter-in-law, Sarah, was just stressed. Maybe she was venting in the wrong way. Maybe I'd taken her words out of context. But no matter how I twisted it in my mind, I couldn't erase those words. She's not family. She gets nothing. It was like they had been burned into my brain. I sat at the kitchen table in my small Florida home, staring at the half-empty coffee cup in front of me. The Florida sun was streaming in through the blinds, painting warm lines across the table. But inside me, everything felt cold. I wanted to believe my son, Matthew, would never let such words go unchallenged. Surely he would defend me. His own mother. Surely he would step in and stop Sarah from speaking about me like I was disposable. But deep down, I knew why Sarah felt comfortable enough to whisper that in the first place. Because Matthew had allowed it. That realization crushed me. I decided to test things. I called Matthew later that afternoon. My voice was light, almost cheerful, like nothing had happened. I asked him if he and Sarah had any plans for the weekend, if I might stop by with a casserole I'd made. His response was slow, almost hesitant. "Oh, Mom, I don't think this weekend's a good time," he said. "Why not?" I asked gently. There was a pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, Sarah's sharp and impatient. Then Matthew cleared his throat. "Sarah's parents are coming into town. We'll be busy with them. Maybe another time, okay?" I forced a smile into my voice. "Of course, sweetheart. Another time." But when I hung up the phone, I sat there in silence, my hands trembling. Sarah's parents. Again. It was always Sarah's parents who got the invitations, the dinners, the family gatherings. They were treated like royalty, welcomed with open arms. And me? I was the afterthought, the outsider. And yet, I wasn't ready to give up. I still love my son. I still love my grandchildren. I wanted to be part of their lives, no matter how small that part might be. So I tried again. The following week, I bought little gifts for the kids. A set of books for Emily, a toy truck for Jacob. I wrapped them carefully, tied them with ribbons, and drove over to Matthew's house, unannounced. I know maybe that wasn't the best idea, but I wanted to see my grandbabies' faces light up. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see the curtains shift inside. Someone had noticed. My heart pounded as I walked up the path, balancing the gifts in my arms. I rang the doorbell and waited. At first there was nothing. No sound, no footsteps, just silence. I rang again. Finally, the door cracked open just a few inches. Sarah stood there, her face tight, her eyes cool. "Oh, hi," she said flatly. "Hi, Sarah," I replied softly, forcing a smile. "I brought some things for the kids. Just a little surprise." Her eyes flicked down to the gifts, then back to my face. She didn't open the door any wider. "Now's not a good time," she said. I felt my throat tighten. I won't stay long. I just wanted to drop these off." Sarah hesitated. Then, with a sigh, she took the gifts from my hands and set them just inside the door. "Thanks," she said. "I'll give them to the kids later." And before I could even respond, she closed the door in my face. I stood there on the porch, the Florida humidity clinging to my skin, the sound of my own heartbeat roaring in my ears. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at that closed door. The barrier between me and the family I'd raised my whole life. I walked back to my car, each step heavier than the last. When I finally slid into the driver's seat, I broke down. Tears streamed down my face as I gripped the steering wheel, my chest aching with a pain I couldn't even put into words. But even then I told myself, don't give up. Don't let them push you out. You're his mother. You're their grandmother. I didn't know it at the time, but things were about to get much worse. Because the next time I saw Matthew, he would say something that shattered me completely. Something that proved Sarah's whispered words weren't just a cruel thought in passing. They were a plan. A plan to erase me from their lives for good. The weeks after that lunch felt heavier than I could have imagined. Every phone call from my son felt rehearsed, like he was carefully choosing every word, measuring what he could and couldn't say, with his wife listening in the background. I would hear her faintly sometimes, a voice chiming in, correcting him, even reminding him about things he shouldn't mention. And I started realizing something terrifying. My son was no longer just my son. He was a man trapped in someone else's world, living under someone else's rules. One Sunday, I decided to drive over to their house unannounced. A mother's instinct doesn't just sit quietly waiting for permission. My son had stopped bringing the grandkids by, and weeks had turned into months since I'd last seen their faces. When I pulled up, I saw the kids in the yard, playing. My heart jumped with joy. I almost forgot about all the whispers and the tension. But when I got out of the car, my daughter-in-law stepped outside with a forced smile. She didn't even let me get near the kids. "Oh, you should have called first," she said, arms crossed, but pretending to look casual. "They're about to nap." "Nap? It's barely noon," I replied softly, trying to keep my voice calm. She sighed, like she was the one being patient with me. "It's better if you let us plan these visits. The kids get overstimulated." Overstimulated. That word cut through me like glass, as if seeing their grandmother was some kind of toxic event. I wanted to protest, to demand to see them, but then I saw my son appear behind her. He didn't look angry, just tired. His eyes caught mine for a brief second and then he looked away, as though he couldn't stand to hold my gaze. "Mum, maybe another day," he muttered. Another day. Always another day. And somehow another day never came. I drove home with tears clouding my vision, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The house felt colder than ever when I walked inside. Silent. Empty. I sat at the kitchen table and realized I was being erased from my own family. Slowly, deliberately erased. And then it got worse. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was from a lawyer. At first, I thought it was some sort of mistake, but then the words burned into me. Regarding future inheritance and estate matters, it was written in cold professional language, but the message was clear. My son and his wife were establishing legal boundaries, and I wasn't supposed to be part of the picture. I sat there, reading those lines again and again. I didn't care about money, I didn't care about property, but the very fact that they were thinking about inheritance, about cutting me out, while I was still alive, while I was still here, trying desperately to be part of their lives, it shattered me. Later that evening, I called my son. I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him, voice cracking. There was a long pause, and then, almost in a whisper, he said, "Mum, it's not me. Please understand, it's not me." Those words told me everything I needed to know. My son was gone. Not physically, but spiritually. Whatever grip she had on him, it was strong enough to make him cut ties with the very woman who raised him. And I'll never forget what happened next. I went to church the following Sunday, like I always did. After the service, one of the ladies from the congregation, someone who lived not far from my son's neighborhood, pulled me aside. She looked uncomfortable, hesitant, but finally said, "I saw your daughter-in-law at the park with the kids the other day. She was introducing another woman to them as their grandmother." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Another grandmother? The betrayal didn't just sting. It hollowed me out. It wasn't enough for her to push me away. She was actively trying to replace me. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about the words I had overheard her whisper. "She's not family, she gets nothing." Maybe she wasn't just talking about inheritance. Maybe she was talking about me, my identity, my role, my place in my own family story. And suddenly, the whispers weren't just whispers anymore. They were becoming reality. But I wasn't going to let it end there. Because sometimes the only way to fight back against being erased is to stand up, loudly, unapologetically, and remind them who you are. And that was the moment I decided I wasn't going to let her silence me anymore. I spent the next morning pacing the length of my small living room, the Florida sun filtering through the blinds like golden bars. I felt trapped, caged by my own thoughts. My son had abandoned me. My daughter-in-law viewed me as a nuisance. And yet, beneath all the bitterness, there was still love. A complicated, tangled love I couldn't easily shake. I decided to drive to their house. I told myself I just wanted clarity, to see things with my own eyes. Maybe to sit down with Sarah and ask her why she hated me so much. But in reality, I think I was desperate to feel included again. When I pulled up to their perfect suburban home, the kind with manicured lawns and two shiny SUVs in the driveway, I hesitated. I almost turned the ignition back on. But then I saw them, Sarah, my daughter-in-law, unloading bags of groceries with Daniel. They looked like the picture-perfect couple, laughing at some private joke. I got out of my car and waved. Daniel froze. His face went pale, as though I was some ghost he hadn't expected to see. Sarah, however, plastered on a polite smile, the kind you give to a stranger you don't want to talk to. "Dad," Daniel said cautiously, What are you doing here?" I forced a smile, trying to ignore the tremor in my voice. "I just thought I'd stop by. Maybe spend some time with my grandson." Sarah's jaw tightened. She clutched one of the grocery bags a little too tightly, her knuckles whitening. Then in the sweetest voice she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but it's really not a good time. The baby's napping, and we've got a lot to do." It was a dismissal wrapped in sugar, but I wasn't ready to leave. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Sarah, can I talk to you for a moment? Alone?" Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. "About what?" "About what you said the other night at the restaurant." Her face drained of colour. She glanced at Daniel quickly, then back at me. "I don't know what you're talking about," but I knew she did. "She's not family, she gets nothing," I repeated quietly, watching her flinch. "Why would you say that, Sarah? Why would you try to cut me out like that? I've done nothing but love my son and your child." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked around as though afraid the neighbours might hear. Then she leaned in, her voice sharp but low. "Because you don't belong, Thomas. You bring drama, you bring guilt, you bring... Wait! Danielle and I are building a future together, and you're just..." She paused, searching for the right word. "A shadow from the past. You're not his wife. You're not the mother of his child. You're a burden." The words hit me harder than any fist ever could. I turned to Daniel, my son, expecting him to defend me, to protest, to at least say something. But he just stood there, eyes fixed on the ground, silent. That silence was worse than Sarah's cruelty. I felt my throat tighten. So that's it. After everything, I'm just disposable? Daniel finally looked at me, his eyes full of conflict. But instead of speaking, he whispered, "Dad, please, just go." I drove home in a fog, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The betrayal cut deeper with every passing mile. Not only Sarah's words, but Daniel's silence. That was the true wound. That night I sat at my kitchen table staring at old photo albums. Daniel's first birthday, his high school graduation, the fishing trips we used to take. I remembered the promises I made to always be there for him, to always stand by his side. But now, he wouldn't even stand by mine. And just when I thought the night couldn't get any darker, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It read, "You don't know the half of it. Meet me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything about Sarah." My heart stopped. Who was this? How did they know me? And what did they mean by everything? The lawyer's office was cold, sterile. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, while the sound of papers rustling echoed louder than it should have. I sat at the long mahogany table, hands trembling, heart pounding. Across from me sat my son and his wife. She had that smug look plastered across her face, the same one I'd seen when she whispered those venomous words at the hospital. The lawyer cleared his throat. "As per the will, everything has been updated to reflect recent changes." I froze. "Recent changes?" He continued. "The property, the savings accounts, and the trust funds are divided between your son and his family. The stipulation regarding lifetime care for you has been removed. It felt like someone punched the air out of my lungs. Removed? My voice cracked. That can't be right. The will always included provisions for me. Always. My daughter-in-law leaned back in her chair, arms folded, lips curving in that same cruel smile. Well, things change. Families change. And frankly, you're not really our responsibility anymore. Her words sliced through me. For years I gave everything. Sleepless nights, double shifts, money I didn't have, to raise my son, to give him a life better than mine. And now here I was, discarded like trash, erased from the future I helped build. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. He knew. He knew this wasn't right. But legally, his hands were tied. My son avoided my gaze. His silence was worse than any insult. It was betrayal in its purest form. I stood, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. You may have erased me on paper, but remember this, blood doesn't vanish with ink. One day, you'll look at your own child and pray they don't do to you what you've done to me. For the first time, my son's eyes flickered with shame. But his wife quickly cut in, her voice sharp. So have the speeches. We have made our choice. I walked out of that office, my legs weak, but my spirit burning with a strange new strength. For years I had defined my worth by what I could give my son, by the hope that one day love and sacrifice would be returned. But now I understood. Some love stories end in betrayal, even between parent and child. That night I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the boxes I had left. Memories, old photographs, keepsakes from a life I thought meant something. And I realized I wasn't powerless. I had something they didn't. Truth. And truth, when spoken, can cut deeper than any betrayal. So I began writing. My story, my pain, my sacrifice, my betrayal. If the world needed to know what happened, then so be it. My voice would not be silenced, because if they wanted to erase me, they forgot one thing: I'm still here. And this is my story.